Hi everyone, it's Tamara here. I'm here to make another Christmas card today, and I am trying to keep it super simple, including making the background panel and doing some very simple Copic colouring. The products I'll be using for this card is the Christmas Carol stamp set from My Favourite Things. I was going to use the little pig and the lamb, but I end up using the little goat and the lamb. I'll also be using the Snowflake Flurry background stamp from My Favourite Things and the Pink Fresh Studio diagonal stitch rectangles. I've got a piece of vellum and also a piece of kind of aqua green cardstock. I've cut my aqua cardstock a little bit bigger than what I'll need for my stitched rectangle that I'll be cutting out, and because the stamp is actually rubber backed, I've just taken out the rubber mat out of my Misti. I've got a little bit of low tack tape on the base so that piece of cardstock stays in place, and we'll just place our background stamp on the front of our Misti and get our card prepped. Now I want to make sure our embossing powder only goes where I want it, so I'm putting a lot of this anti-static powder tool all over, giving it a good rub over to make sure that there is no static electricity. And I'm going in with my Versa Watermark ink and giving it a good coverage over my snowflakes and giving it a good press down. I like to do this a few times just to make sure I've got enough ink on there, because sometimes it's a little hard to see with the Versamark color being clear, so I do want to make sure that I've got good coverage for my embossing powder to stick to. So sometimes it's good to grab out a cloth like I am now to make sure we get a good amount of pressure all over that stamp. Now I've got my piece of folded printer paper to catch my excess embossing powder, just being careful picking up my piece of cardstock so I don't put my fingers on any of that ink. I'm going to scoop that back in, and I make a lot of a mess, but I'll flip this around and I'll do the other end of that panel, shaking off the excess and give it a good amount of coverage, and just give it a little flick at the back just to make sure that there's no stray pieces of embossing powder. Now I've preheated my heat tool, so I'll go into the back first to get rid of any loose pieces of embossing powder, and then go to the front and give it a nice melt over all the panel. So I just try and go in rows to make it easy and make sure I don't miss any portions. And it's great having my glass mat because I can just emboss straight, or heat on to that glass mat without anything getting damaged. So I've got a good coverage. Sorry, I've kind of got that up and it's kind of focusing in and out. Go down to this end to make sure this is all nice and melted, and then I will set that aside to dry before we cut it out. While I've got our Misti out, I'll do some stamping of the little images. So as you can see, this is where I grab the little goat by mistake. But once I've stamped it out, he looks so cute that I had to colour him up anyway. So I'm making sure that that piece of Copic XPress cardstock is just tucked into the corner, and using some Memento Tuxedo black ink, which is great for Copic colouring, I've got that stamped out and ready to go. As I said, I'm going to keep this really simple today for the colouring. So I'm only going to use the same colours on each of our little critters. So I'm using some neutral greys for their fur, and then we'll use the same colours for their accessories that they're wearing, like his little cute little hat and her beautiful scarf. So I'm getting this all coloured out. I'll have all the colours just showing up in the top left hand corner with my lids. I did miss under this little portion of his scarf, which will obviously be throwing a bit of shadow. And now we'll bring in the lightest colour. So I'm leaving quite a bit of white cardstock in place because we kind of want him to look like a white, a white little goat, as we do the little sheep will look like a white sheep as well, but we do need to add our shadows in. So I did use some Colour Splendor just to soften that blend out, and now wanting to put some little cute rosy cheeks on these cute critters. So again, I'm just going to blend that out with the lightest marker I used in our fur combination, just to make sure that softens those little pink cheeks. And I'm going to use the same colours in our little sheep, but with the actual wool, I'm just kind of doing little curly lines around the fur or around the wool sections. So on the face, I'm keeping it flat, but on the area that looks like it's curly, I'm just doing these little curly lines to make it look nice and textured and look like wool. So just gone in with the darkest color, then the N1, and then blending out so that it's still got a plenty of white cardstock with the N0. Just doing those little swirly marks. And again, I'm going to put some pink cheeks with the R83, blend it out with the R81, and use that lightest N0 marker to soften that blend out for those cute little pink cheeks. Now I did miss his little arms here. I'm showing that they don't have any tops on, but they do have some gloves on, which I'm going to colour up to match him with the hats and scarves. Now I'm just doing some little lines to kind of make this look like a little fluffy top on his little hat, and just using the same colours that I used for his fur to make that look white as well. Now I'm just going to use again the same colours that I used for the cheeks for his ears. So the R81 will blend out the R83, and then we'll just use that neutral 0 marker to do a blend out into his ears. Now I'm going to use the same kind of colours that I used in that card base, that cardstock, to colour up their little accessories. So I'm just going to use the same end markers to make my little white stripes on their hats, and then I'm going to use that kind of like aqua green colour to colour up all the rest of the accessories. So I'm going to leave the little dots because I'm going to have white dots on his little greeny aqua scarf, but I'm going to leave them till last. So I'm just colouring in the shadows, which was going to be at the base of the scarves and of the hat. And I did miss over on that right side on that scarf. So now I'm going back in with the lightest colour, the N0, to blend out, but still leaving white cardstock there. Now for our aqua green, I'm going to use BG34 as my darkest colour. So the top of his hat's going to be fully green, and then obviously the lines of the hat and the scarf on this little sheep. And I'll also be doing their gloves to match as well. So using the same colours, so BG32 to blend out the BG34. Just slowly working the shadows from the bottom up to the top. These are quite small, so you just kind of want to pick a section to have as a shadow or contrast. So we've got his little hat coloured now. Finish off on those little stripes underneath, and the same with her scarf here. And I did realise I missed over this left hand side, so I finished that off, and we'll do his little gloves as well as her gloves. So the dark colour down the bottom, away from the light which is shining from the top. Blend that out, and then bring our lightest colour, the BG11, to complete our gloves. Now I'm going to colour up his scarf with the same colours. So we see where his little chin will throw a bit of a shadow, as well as where that scarf folds over. And I also want to do the base of the scarf a bit darker as well. So blend that out with the BG32. Just being careful of those little spots on the scarf, because we do want to colour them up as little white dots, but we do want to put some shadow in there so it looks like we haven't forgotten to colour them. So now I'm just going to use 2 markers for this, the N3 to put a little shadow down the bottom, and then the N0 to blend that out. So I didn't worry about the N1 for this because they're so small. Now for the little horns and the book, I'm going to keep them the same colour. So I'm going to use E84, kind of making them look kind of off-white. So as our shadow colour, then E81 to blend that out. And our final colour is E50. And that's all our colouring done. Now I hadn't actually used this before, so I'm going to use my little snippers to cut out. So I just wanted to show you how to do this. I like to kind of wiggle them so that I don't get any little bits of metal flying around my craft room. So I'm just trimming that up and getting rid of that middle section, and then just wiggling those out. You'll see one fling off here. So be careful when you're doing this. I like to recommend wearing some glasses while you're doing that. And I did the other one off camera. Now just using some purple tape, I'm going to line these little dies up. I find the purple tape works really well to make sure that when you line them up and run them through your die cut machine, they stay in the place that you want. So we'll pop on the one for the little sheep. Make sure that's got lined up all the way around, and we'll tape that one down as well. And once we've got that taped, I'm going to grab out my Spellbinders machine. So we've got platform A and plate B. Then we've got our little base platform C and our top platform C to be able to cut this out. So I'll just show you one. So I'll take it out and show that this has held that die in place. And we've got the perfect cutout little critter. I'll be using the largest of the diagonal stitch rectangles, but I'm actually swapped out this Scrap Dragon Scalloped rectangle die for the smaller stitch die because I found it showed the background a little bit more. Now I'm going to stamp up my sentiment. Now originally I did it on this color, and because I did filming of it, I'm just showing you how I did it. So just prepping it again with my anti-static powder tool and using my Versa watermark to get that stamped up. I did that 3 times to make sure I've got a good coverage, and we're going to scatter our embossing powder over that again. Giving it a tap off. Again, I've preheated my heat tool, and we'll go in until that's all nice and melted. So just go along until you've got that all melted and ready to go. And once that's dry, we'll give that a wipe off. And I'm going to be using the MFT sentiment banners to cut this out. So because this banner is a little bit longer than what we're needing, I'm just going to pop it down one end in the correct position, tape that down so it stays in place, and run that through my die cutting machine, making sure it's nice and straight. And once I've run that through the one end, I'm just going to pop that out and just use that purple tape to hold that in place at the other end. So I'm going to line that up, but make sure that it's measured the same as the other end. Tape that down, and again just run that through my die cut machine to get the perfect size banner. Now this is where I start assembling everything and realize that I wanted to change up that sentiment. So I've cut and scored a white card base, and I'm going to put some glue on the back of our Snowflake banner and just attach that directly onto that card base, lining that up so we've got a little border all the way around. Once that's attached, we can get all our elements ready and onto the front. Now this is when I'm looking and just thinking that's going to get a little bit lost with our little background. So what I decide to do is actually utilize the other color that I used for our images and do a gray background for our sentiment. Now I didn't have any grey cardstock in my stash that was the right coloured grey. It was either too dark or kind of like a browny grey. So I grabbed out some Hickory Smoke Distress Oxide and just ink blended up a panel, making sure it's the right size for our sentiment. And now you can see I swap it out, and that I think looks so much better, and it just stands out a lot more and doesn't get lost with that background. Now I'm going to pop some foam tape on the back of our images and also our sentiment. So I pop one on each of these, and then I do put a little bit extra. Now that one I cut a little bit too big, so I'm going to use that for our sentiment strip and cut a smaller one for our little sheep. And then we're going to get a few on the back of our sentiment strip. And then off camera, I'll just take off the release paper, just making sure you can't see that on the other side. Now, because of the vellum, you can't really put glue on it because it does sometimes show through. So I was about to stick the sentiment strip down, but some of the foam tape goes on the outside. So I'm going to use that and flip it over because I've already taken the release paper off, and just work out where I want my little critters to stand up above it. So I'm just going to line that up on this side, and then I'm going to put my little sheep on the other side, placed just there. And now I'm going to be able to put some glue where these are going to sit and cover up any glue, so no glue will show through. So I'm putting plenty on behind our images, and I did go out a little bit there, and I'm going to put some where our sentiment strip will be, just to make sure we've got plenty to cover. But I'm just going to wipe that little bit off that went outside of where our image is. And I'm going to move that out of the way so I don't stick my hand on my foam tape. Line this up and get that glued down. And then we're going to stick our sentiment strip on. So I'm just going to turn that around, line that up, and stick our sentiment on. And this is the finished card for this tutorial. As you can see, these curators are just so cute, and just doing a simple heat embossing background on some cardstock that you have in your stash, stamping out a sentiment and some simple Copic colouring can make a really quick and beautiful Christmas card to send out. I hope you've enjoyed this card making tutorial. If you have, please hit the like button, and if you'd like to see any future videos, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.